The lavender gas giant Zyphora loomed large outside the panoramic windows of the orbital station, casting a soft purple glow over the metallic walls and polished floors. From a distance, the station looked like a jewel floating in space, an impressive feat of alien engineering. Inside, life was a careful balance of order and curiosity, ruled by beings whose appearance was as strange as their intelligence. They were the feline-like aliens, known for their sharp claws, expressive eyes, and quiet, calculating minds. At the center of it all sat their enigmatic leader, Cat Queen Jara, her presence commanding respect and awe. Jara's fascination had always been with her triplets. Unlike other offspring of their kind, these three were paralyzed, unable to move their limbs, but their minds were brilliant. The queen observed them constantly, never leaving their side, or more accurately, their containment area. Cameras were installed everywhere, in the ceiling, along the walls, even embedded subtly in the furniture. Every flicker of an eye, every tiny movement, every subtle pulse of their biosignals was recorded and analyzed. To Jara, it was a mixture of scientific curiosity and a protective instinct. She wanted to understand their capabilities, but she also wanted to keep them safe, even if that safety felt like confinement. Humans were a rare sight on the station. They were considered industrious, resourceful, and sometimes unpredictable, which made them both valuable and amusing to the feline rulers. Among the few humans was Jax, a janitor with a quiet presence. He had been working on the station for over a decade, his uniform blending with the background, his existence largely ignored. But Jax had a mind that noticed everything. Where others saw walls and cameras, he saw patterns. Where others saw rules, he saw possibilities. On this morning, Jax moved quietly through the corridors, pushing a cart filled with cleaning supplies. The lavender light from Zyphora filtered through the windows, reflecting off his polished boots. As he passed the observation deck, he paused, eyes narrowing. The cameras were active, recording streams of data from the triplets' containment chamber. He had seen them before, three small, delicate forms lying on the cushioned floor of their enclosure. Their eyes were open, watching, thinking, and yet their bodies could not respond. Jax crouched by a console, pretending to inspect a spill. His human mind ticked over possibilities. These cameras, these constant feeds, they were more than surveillance. They were a form of control, a way for the queen to dominate the triplets' lives without considering the depth of their intelligence. He had noticed the subtle changes in their eyes, the way tiny shifts of focus seemed to communicate something. It was like watching a conversation he could not yet understand. He remembered the first time he had noticed it. One of the triplets had blinked in a particular rhythm, and for a moment he had been sure it was deliberate. He had watched, curious, and then realized that the sequence repeated. Someone or something was trying to communicate. The queen had dismissed it, claiming it was random neurological activity, but Jax had felt a spark of recognition. Humans, after all, often understood patterns that others overlooked. That evening, as the station hummed with quiet life, Jax returned to the observation deck under the pretense of routine maintenance. The lights were dimmed, and most of the station's personnel were in their quarters. He carried a small bag of tools, screwdrivers, wires, and a few simple electronics components. He did not know exactly what he would find, but he trusted his instincts. As he approached the console, the triplets' eyes seemed to focus on him. There was a flicker in the air, almost as if they recognized him. He whispered softly, though he knew they could not hear him in the conventional sense. "Hello," he said. "I think I can help." There was no sound, but in the quiet way of the station, he imagined that a connection had formed. Jax worked carefully, his hands moving quickly but precisely. He rerouted one of the camera feeds to a small portable device, creating a loop that would display a harmless image to anyone monitoring remotely. The queen would see the normal, calm activity in the chamber, unaware that Jax was experimenting with new ways to interpret the triplets' signals. He attached small sensors to the enclosure, designed to pick up subtle biosignals, pressure, blinking sequences, even minor electrical impulses. Hours passed. The station's ambient hum filled the room, broken only by the quiet clicks of Jax's tools. Gradually, patterns began to emerge on his portable screen. The triplets were indeed communicating. Tiny pulses of light and pressure corresponded to deliberate sequences, a language built from the limits of their physical condition. Jax's heart raced. Humans had always been clever, capable of seeing solutions where others could not. Now that ingenuity was the bridge between species and between abilities. He documented everything carefully, making notes on sequences, timing, and intensity. The triplets seemed to respond when he focused attention on their signals, almost as if they were testing him, trying to measure the limits of his understanding. The challenge thrilled him. There was a joy in discovery, a quiet pride in knowing that his curiosity might free minds trapped in bodies that could not move. Days passed. Jax returned to the observation deck each night, refining his system. He built a small interface that allowed him to send simple patterns back into the enclosure, testing the triplets' responses. With each experiment, the communication became clearer. The triplets were intelligent, strategic, and eager to interact. For the first time, they had someone who could understand them, not a queen who saw them as fragile curiosities, but a human who saw them as equals in intellect. Meanwhile, Queen Jara noticed subtle discrepancies in the camera feeds. Occasionally, she saw brief flickers, slight irregularities in the images. Her instincts were sharp, and she grew suspicious. She dispatched a patrol, feline guards with keen senses and quick reflexes, to inspect the observation deck. Jax, anticipating this, worked quickly to disguise his tampering. The feeds returned to normal before the patrol arrived, and the sensors he had installed were small enough to go unnoticed. The Queen's eyes narrowed as she studied the feeds from her throne. Something was happening, something that her cameras did not capture fully. She could feel it, an undercurrent of change, a subtle shift in the patterns she had always controlled. Her triplets, paralyzed though they were, seemed to hold secrets that even she could not decipher. She did not yet understand that a human, underestimated and quiet, had become the key to unlocking those secrets. Jax felt a sense of cautious triumph. He had not yet fully revealed his presence, and the Queen remained unaware of the progress he had made. The triplets' blinking sequences had become more complex, more deliberate, and Jax had begun to recognize not only their intelligence but their potential. He imagined what they could do if freed from their physical limitations, even partially. His mind raced with possibilities, virtual simulations, limited mobility through mechanical aids, a future where the triplets could interact with the world in ways the Queen had never considered. Night after night, Jax and the triplets worked in silence. Their interactions were subtle but meaningful. A flick of light here, a pulse there, each communication building upon the last. The janitor's heart swelled with hope. Humans were often overlooked in alien societies, seen as simple, expendable, or predictable. But in reality, human ingenuity, empathy, and adaptability were powerful tools. And here, in this remote station orbiting a distant gas giant, those qualities had found their purpose. By the end of the week, Jax had created a rudimentary system of communication that allowed the triplets to send and receive simple messages. He leaned back in his chair, exhausted but exhilarated, and whispered, "We're just getting started." He knew that the coming days would bring challenges. The Queen's suspicion would grow, and the station was not a forgiving place. But he also knew that intelligence, courage, and clever thinking, the essence of humanity, could achieve remarkable things. For the first time, the triplets experienced the thrill of interaction beyond their physical confines. They pulsed messages of curiosity, gratitude, and wonder. Jax smiled, understanding their intent. "We'll find a way," he said softly, "I promise." And in the quiet hum of the station, under the lavender glow of Zyphora, a quiet revolution began, a human-led effort to unlock the potential of minds that the universe had underestimated. Jax had never been a hero. At least, that was what he told himself every morning as he pushed his janitor's cart through the quiet corridors of the station. Yet here he was, more involved in a delicate experiment than anyone above him could imagine. The triplets' signals pulsed across his makeshift interface, and with each pattern he decoded, a clearer understanding of their intelligence emerged. They were brilliant, far more capable than the Queen had ever assumed. Tonight, as the lavender glow of Zyphora bathed the station in soft light, Jax settled in at the observation deck. He adjusted the sensors, checked the wiring, and made sure the camera feeds remained indistinguishable from the normal patterns. The Queen's suspicion was growing, but she still could not pinpoint the source. Every human step, every careful movement of his hands had to be precise. One mistake could reveal his work and the triplets' secret too soon. The triplets' pulses were stronger tonight. They had begun to experiment with sequences he had not taught them. Tiny variations in rhythm, intensity, and timing suggested creativity, an understanding of cause and effect. Jax's heart quickened. Humans had a knack for problem-solving under pressure, and he now saw it reflected in these young alien minds. Though their bodies could not move, their thoughts were agile, inventive, and determined. He initiated the next step. Using his portable interface, he sent a simple pattern, a flickering sequence meant to mimic a gesture of greeting. The triplets responded almost instantly, adapting the pattern in ways Jax had not anticipated. It was as if they were not only learning from him but also teaching him in return. A human janitor and 3 alien children, communicating silently through lights and pulses, connected in a way that transcended species, physical limitations, and expectation. As the hours passed, Jax grew bolder. He began testing small experiments with the triplets' environment. He modified the containment chamber subtly, installing soft cushions and lightweight devices that allowed them to apply minimal pressure to objects. With each successful interaction, the triplets grew more confident. They were learning the limits of their containment, and more importantly, they were learning to manipulate the environment in ways the Queen would never anticipate. Meanwhile, in her throne room, Queen Jara was becoming increasingly unsettled. The feeds from her cameras showed minor anomalies, moments of activity that made no sense. A cushion slightly out of place, a shadow that shifted unexpectedly, a faint flicker of the triplets' sensors. These were small things, but in her mind they hinted at change. She trusted her senses, and something was troubling them. For the first time, she could not fully control the situation. Back in the observation deck, Jax paused to think. He had been careful to avoid detection, but he also knew that caution alone would not be enough. The triplets had potential far beyond what the Queen imagined. If he could find a way to enhance their mobility, even slightly, their abilities could become extraordinary. He rifled through his tool bag, pulling out a collection of wires, sensors, and a small portable device he had cobbled together. The goal was simple: create a rudimentary interface that could translate the triplets' neural signals into controlled movement of lightweight tools within the chamber. Hours became days. Jax worked late into the station's night cycle, often catching only brief moments of rest. He was careful, but he also had to be decisive. The triplets were responsive, learning faster than he expected. With his system, they could move a small ball back and forth, nudging it with precise pulses of thought. For them, this was freedom, even if only symbolic. For Jax, it was proof that ingenuity and creativity could overcome limitations, even in a society dominated by beings who considered humans inferior. The first success thrilled him. The triplets managed to manipulate the ball independently, and when Jax observed the patterns of their thought, he realized they were playing a form of strategy game. Their pulses indicated satisfaction, curiosity, and above all, understanding. They were not passive subjects. They were problem solvers capable of innovation and adaptation. But the Queen's suspicion was nearing a tipping point. She sent additional patrols to monitor the observation deck and check the camera systems for interference. Jax had anticipated this. He created diversions in the camera loops, small glitches that looked like technical malfunctions. When the patrols arrived, they saw nothing unusual and moved on. But Jara herself was not fooled. She studied the feeds with a keen eye, noticing the subtle patterns that escaped everyone else. Her triplets were acting in ways they should not have been capable of, and that realization both worried and intrigued her. Jax realized he needed to be cautious. He could not simply continue undetected forever. Eventually, the Queen would discover the extent of the triplets' abilities. But he also knew that human ingenuity thrived under constraints. He devised a plan to accelerate the triplets' progress while minimizing the risk of detection. He began sending controlled sequences that simulated interaction with the environment, allowing the triplets to develop complex problem-solving skills without alerting the Queen. The triplets responded with astonishing speed. Within days, they could manipulate objects with surprising precision, moving them across the chamber, stacking them, and even creating simple patterns. Their minds were growing stronger, more confident, and more independent. Jax watched with pride. Humans had a way of seeing potential where others saw limitation, and here he had unlocked abilities that even the Queen had underestimated. One night, as Jax adjusted the sensors, he noticed something extraordinary. The triplets' pulses formed a pattern that suggested planning, anticipation, and cooperation. It was a form of silent conversation, a strategy forming in their minds. Jax realized that they were beginning to understand the very concept of teamwork and foresight, skills that could allow them to navigate the station's systems if given even minimal mobility. The thought thrilled him. Humans were never meant to rely solely on brute strength. Our strength was in creativity, adaptation, and cooperation. Here, in a distant alien station, a janitor and three paralyzed beings were demonstrating precisely that. The triplets' abilities were no longer theoretical. They were practical, observable, and evolving. Yet danger loomed. Queen Jara's curiosity was relentless and her intelligence unmatched. She would not ignore anomalies for long. Jax knew that the next step would require careful planning. He needed to expand the triplets' abilities while keeping the queen unaware. He began devising small mechanical aids, lightweight rods, soft extensions, and interfaces that could translate neural impulses into motion. Each device was simple, almost crude, but it was enough to allow the triplets to interact with their environment beyond their physical limitations. The triplets reacted immediately, testing the devices, exploring what they could do. For the first time, they were not entirely confined to their enclosure. They nudged objects, triggered mechanisms, and experimented with cause and effect. Their minds raced with possibilities, and Jax guided them patiently, ensuring that their actions remained subtle enough to avoid detection. As the days passed, the Queen's unease grew. Her patrols reported no obvious interference, but subtle inconsistencies remained. She could feel a shift in the atmosphere of her station, a ripple of change she could not control. For the first time, the limitations she had placed on her own offspring were being circumvented, not by brute force or alien power, but by human ingenuity. Jax realized that the moment of reckoning was approaching. He had pushed the triplets' abilities as far as he could under the radar. To advance further, he would need to risk exposure. But he also understood something fundamental about humans. Courage often emerged in moments of necessity. The next steps would require careful calculation, clever improvisation, and most importantly, trust. He looked at the triplets, their pulses steady and deliberate, their minds sharp and eager. They had grown in intelligence and confidence, and their silent communication was now a complex language of its own. Jax smiled, knowing that the journey had only just begun. Humans were underestimated everywhere. But in this station, orbiting a distant gas giant, ingenuity and determination had created a bridge between species, unlocking potential that had seemed impossible. That night, as the lavender light bathed the observation deck, Jax whispered softly, "We're ready for the next step." The triplets pulsed in response, a silent acknowledgement of their understanding and anticipation. Outside, the station hummed quietly, unaware of the silent revolution taking place within its walls. The Queen, in her throne room, stared at the camera feeds with narrowed eyes. Something was changing, something she had not anticipated. The triplets were no longer passive subjects. They were becoming active agents of their own destiny, guided by the most unlikely of allies, a human janitor whose quiet determination was reshaping the balance of power. In the heart of the station, a small spark of human ingenuity burned bright. It was subtle, invisible to most, yet powerful beyond measure. And in that spark, the triplets found hope, potential, and a future that was no longer confined by paralysis or expectation. Days passed quietly on the station, but the quiet was deceptive. Jax had entered a rhythm with the triplets, studying their pulses, testing their limits, and helping them expand their understanding of the world around them. The simple devices he had built allowed the triplets to manipulate small objects, but now he knew they could do more. They could influence the station's systems in subtle ways, almost imperceptible to the Queen. Tonight, the observation deck hummed with activity, though it appeared silent and empty. Jax worked with meticulous care, attaching new interfaces to the triplets' containment chamber. These were more advanced than the previous devices, lightweight manipulators connected to their biosignals, translating thought into movement. The triplets had learned quickly. They understood how to control the devices almost instinctively. Jax smiled as he watched the first test. One of the triplets focused on a small tool suspended on the floor. Its neural pulse sent a signal through the interface, and the tool shifted slightly, then rolled gently across the chamber. The triplet's eyes widened, glowing faintly as if in recognition of success. The others pulsed in response, a silent message of encouragement. Jax's heart raced. Human ingenuity had created a bridge between physical limitation and intelligence, giving the triplets a taste of freedom. But the Queen's eyes were always watching. Even as Jax celebrated small victories, he knew Jara would notice the changes eventually. She had already grown suspicious of subtle anomalies in the camera feeds, and she would not ignore them forever. Every moment had to be calculated. The triplets' movements were small and careful, almost like whispers of motion. but each success increased the risk of discovery. The following day, Jax began teaching the triplets more complex tasks. They learned to manipulate multiple objects at once, stacking tools, nudging devices, and creating patterns. It was not play, it was training their minds to coordinate, strategize, and problem-solve in 3 dimensions. Jax guided them patiently, never pushing too fast, always observing the feedback from their pulses. The triplets were intelligent enough to improvise, and soon they were experimenting with new sequences he had not suggested. Their creativity astounded him. One triplet, the youngest, managed to trigger a small mechanism in the corner of the chamber, opening a hidden panel that had gone unnoticed for years. Jax froze for a moment, a mix of excitement and concern running through him. This was the breakthrough he had been waiting for. The panel revealed access to a narrow maintenance passage connected to the station's service systems. It was a path no one expected the triplets to reach, and it could allow them to explore beyond their enclosure. The triplets pulsed in excitement. Jax understood them perfectly. They were asking him if they could venture through the passage. The human part of him felt a thrill. Humans had always succeeded where others doubted us, using intelligence and creativity instead of brute strength. Now he was seeing it in action, guiding beings who had been underestimated for their entire lives. Yet caution remained. The Queen's surveillance was never far. Any attempt to move beyond the enclosure had to be subtle, calculated, and almost invisible. Jax devised a plan. Using a looped camera feed and a sequence of timed signals, he could make the Queen's monitors show normal activity in the chamber while the triplets explored the passage in brief intervals. It was risky, but he knew the reward outweighed the danger. That night they began their first trial. Jax coordinated the signals carefully. One triplet moved a small tool toward the hidden panel, activating the mechanism to open it. The others followed instructions from his guidance, coordinating their pulses to ensure the movement appeared random to outside observation. To anyone watching, it was nothing unusual, just minor fluctuations in activity, but to Jax and the triplets, it was freedom in miniature. The passage was dark and narrow, lined with cables and maintenance conduits. The triplets moved slowly, guided by the neural interfaces and their own intuition. Jax monitored every signal, ready to intervene if the Queen discovered them. Their minds were sharp, and they adapted quickly to the new environment. Every obstacle they encountered, wires, panels, tiny gaps, was met with a solution devised by intelligence rather than physical strength. By the 3rd attempt, the triplets had managed to reach a junction point that connected to several parts of the station. They pulsed with excitement, signaling their eagerness to explore further. Jax encouraged them, reminding them to be cautious, to move only when they could remain unseen. The Queen's suspicions were growing, and he knew that one careless move could reveal everything. Meanwhile, in the throne room, Jara's eyes narrowed. She could sense a subtle disturbance in the flow of her station. The triplets were no longer behaving as she expected. Something had changed, and she could feel it in the patterns she had always controlled. She dispatched additional patrols and ordered a review of the camera systems. Her feline instincts told her that someone, or something, was altering the balance of her domain. Jax knew the risk had increased. The Queen's attention would soon fall closer to the observation deck. He made a decision. It was time to push the triplets' abilities further. If they could navigate the maintenance passage and interact with the station's systems without detection, they could begin to influence the station in subtle, meaningful ways. It was a dangerous step, but it was also necessary. The next trial involved controlling the flow of minor systems in the station. Lights, vents, small automated mechanisms, nothing that could cause harm but enough to test their coordination and planning. Jax guided them through each task, monitoring their pulses and adjusting the interfaces as needed. The triplets were quick learners. Their movements, though virtual, were precise, almost like a dance of intelligence. Then came the breakthrough. One triplet, focusing intently, managed to trigger a minor override in the station's maintenance system. A vent opened slightly, a panel shifted, and small devices responded to their neural signals. Jax's heart pounded. This was not mere interaction. This was influence over the station itself. The triplets were no longer passive observers. They were actors, shaping their environment through intelligence and careful coordination. The thrill was tempered by danger. The Queen's attention was growing sharper, her instincts leading her closer to discovery. But Jax knew that human ingenuity thrived under constraints. They would continue carefully, subtly, using intelligence, strategy, and creativity to advance their capabilities. Over the following days, the triplets became more adept at controlling minor systems. They communicated with Jax in complex sequences of pulses, indicating plans, warnings, and even suggestions. It was a silent collaboration, a merging of human strategy and alien intellect. Jax marveled at their problem-solving skills. Humans had always used creativity to overcome challenges, and now he saw it reflected in beings who had been underestimated their entire lives. The Queen, growing frustrated, ordered a full review of the observation deck and maintenance passages, yet no evidence was found. The anomalies she sensed were subtle enough to be dismissed as technical fluctuations. Still, she could feel the change in the station, a ripple in the order she had long maintained. The triplets were no longer confined to passive existence. Their intelligence, guided by human ingenuity, was becoming a force she could not yet control. Jax realized the stakes had risen. They had achieved remarkable progress, but the Queen's suspicion meant that the next steps required even greater care. He began planning a more ambitious expansion of the triplets' abilities, allowing them to interact with more significant systems, to explore the station more freely, and to develop skills that could protect them in case of discovery. That night, as the lavender glow bathed the observation deck, Jax whispered to the triplets, "Tomorrow we go further, be ready." Their pulses responded with certainty, a clear message of understanding and anticipation. The silent revolution had grown, shaped by intelligence, creativity, and the courage to act. Human ingenuity had unlocked potential in minds that no one had expected to be powerful. Outside, the station continued its quiet orbit around Zyphora. To the Queen, everything appeared normal. To the patrols, nothing seemed amiss. But within the observation deck and the hidden maintenance passages, a remarkable transformation was underway. 3 paralyzed triplets, guided by a human janitor, were beginning to change the rules of their existence. Jax leaned back, tired but satisfied. He knew the Queen would notice soon. He also knew that humans had a way of finding solutions in impossible situations. The triplets had potential far beyond what anyone had imagined, and together they were discovering what could be achieved with intelligence, patience, and clever strategy. The first stage of freedom was complete, but the journey had only just begun. The triplets had begun to understand themselves, the station, and the possibilities that lay before them. And in the quiet hum of the orbital station, under the soft glow of Zyphora, the seeds of change were planted. Seeds that would grow into something no one, not even the Cat Queen, could have anticipated. The lavender light of Zyphora washed over the station in gentle waves, but inside, tension simmered. Jax knew the Queen was growing ever more suspicious. Her patrols had become more frequent, her attention sharper, and her instincts, never wrong, were beginning to sense the unusual activity. Yet he had a plan, one that balanced risk with opportunity, intelligence with careful timing. Tonight, the triplets would take a step beyond what they had ever done before. The new devices he had prepared were simple but effective. Lightweight neuro-interface suits allowed the triplets to move parts of their bodies for the first time, translating their mental impulses into real, controlled motion. Their limbs still required careful guidance, but it was enough to allow interaction with their environment in ways they had never imagined. Jax helped them into the suits, adjusting sensors and ensuring that the feedback loops were precise. The triplets pulsed with excitement, their neural signals radiating eagerness and curiosity. They had understood the mechanics of their previous experiments, and now they were ready to extend their influence into the real world. Jax guided them carefully, demonstrating small movements, lifting a tool, nudging a cushion, adjusting a lever. The first attempts were tentative, cautious, but each success was a triumph. As the triplets grew more confident, Jax pushed the boundaries. He had planned for this moment, anticipating potential errors and creating safeguards. The Queen would notice subtle movements if they were too bold, so every action had to appear incidental. Yet the intelligence of the triplets allowed them to adapt rapidly. Within minutes, they were performing small sequences, moving objects precisely, arranging tools, and even triggering simple mechanisms in the chamber. Outside, the Queen watched her monitors with increasing concern. Subtle anomalies persisted in the camera feeds. Shadows shifted where they should not, panels appeared slightly ajar, and patterns of activity suggested intentional manipulation. She narrowed her eyes, instincts telling her that something had changed. Her triplets were no longer passive observers. They were learning, adapting, and possibly planning. Jax, sensing the growing tension, decided it was time for a critical test. Using the maintenance passage he had discovered earlier, he guided the triplets beyond their chamber for the first time. The interface suits allowed them to navigate the narrow passage safely, moving along conduits and avoiding surveillance. Every step was measured, every pulse calculated. The Queen's attention might fall upon them at any moment, and failure would have severe consequences. The passage opened into a section of the station largely ignored by patrols, storage corridors, small service rooms, and minor control panels. Jax led the triplets carefully, instructing them to manipulate minor systems to test their abilities. Lights shifted, vents adjusted, and small devices responded to their neural signals. To anyone observing, it appeared as if the station were functioning normally, but for Jax and the triplets, it was proof that they could influence their world beyond the limitations of their bodies. Encouraged by success, Jax devised a more ambitious plan. They would extend their control to systems that affected the comfort and efficiency of the station, minor environmental adjustments, automated cleaning units, and communication relays. These actions were subtle enough to avoid detection but significant enough to demonstrate capability. The triplets responded with precision, their coordination improving with every trial. The Queen's unease grew. She noticed that her patrol reports no longer matched the activity she sensed. She ordered a direct inspection of the observation deck and maintenance passages. Jax knew the time had come to act quickly. The triplets had reached a level of proficiency where they could interact with the station effectively, but they needed to maintain secrecy. He devised a diversion, a looped camera feed, timed alerts, and minor environmental glitches that would appear natural to any observer. The operation began. The triplets moved through the passage, activating small systems in a coordinated sequence. Jax monitored every pulse, every movement, ensuring that their actions were synchronized and efficient. The Queen's monitors displayed the normal activity loops, masking the real movements. It was a delicate balance, but human ingenuity allowed for precision where brute strength or alien oversight might fail. Then, for the first time, the Queen observed something she could not explain. A small vent opened, not as part of a maintenance cycle, but seemingly controlled. A device shifted position independently. Patterns that had been predictable now showed signs of intelligence. Her ears twitched, and she stood abruptly from her throne, her tail lashing with agitation. Something extraordinary was happening, something beyond her comprehension. Jax knew the Queen was on the move. Patrols would soon investigate the anomaly directly. He accelerated the triplets' learning, guiding them through more complex tasks while maintaining the illusion of randomness. They adjusted mechanisms, nudged devices, and subtly influenced minor systems, all without attracting attention. The triplets' minds were sharp, and their coordination was near perfect. It was a human-led strategy executed flawlessly by alien intelligence. The breakthrough came when one of the triplets manipulated a small communication relay. Signals flowed differently, allowing the triplets to send messages to Jax in real time without interference from the Queen's monitoring systems. This was a significant advancement. For the first time, they had direct communication independent of visual observation or sensor interpretation. Jax's heart raced. The triplets could now strategize, plan, and execute complex actions without the constant need for human intervention. But the Queen was relentless. She arrived at the observation deck herself, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the environment. The camera feeds appeared normal, but she sensed subtle irregularities. Panels were slightly misaligned, minor mechanisms had shifted, and a faint hum suggested activity beyond what she expected. Her instincts told her that her triplets were no longer passive, that someone or something was guiding them. Jax remained calm, focusing on the triplets. They were aware of her presence, yet they continued their work with careful precision. Each movement, each pulse was deliberate, a demonstration of intelligence and adaptability. The Queen's attention grew, but she could not yet pinpoint the source of the anomalies. She watched, fascinated and frustrated, as her children displayed capabilities she had not anticipated. The triplets, guided by Jax, completed a series of coordinated tasks that demonstrated both mobility and strategy. Tools were moved, panels adjusted, and devices activated in a sequence that suggested planning and foresight. Jax observed proudly. Humans had always thrived under pressure, using creativity and adaptability to overcome obstacles. Now that ingenuity had been shared in a way with three alien minds, unlocking potential that the Queen had overlooked. As the Queen studied her monitors, one of the triplets focused on a small lever in the chamber. The neurointerface suit translated their mental signal into movement, and the lever shifted slightly, opening a hidden panel. The Queen froze. This was not a random action. It was deliberate, intelligent, and coordinated. Her eyes widened as she realized the extent of what was happening. Jax whispered to the triplets, guiding them carefully. "Stay focused. Move slowly, precisely. We cannot be caught now." The triplets responded instantly, their pulses conveying understanding and determination. Together, they manipulated the environment, creating a sequence of actions that allowed them to move more freely within the enclosure. The Queen could watch, but she could not intervene immediately. The tension in the station was palpable. Patrols moved cautiously, unaware of the silent revolution unfolding. Jax continued to guide the triplets, coordinating their actions and ensuring that every movement remained subtle enough to avoid immediate detection. The neurointerface suits allowed the triplets unprecedented control, and their intelligence transformed this control into strategy. For the first time, the triplets experienced true interaction with their environment. They could move parts of their bodies, manipulate objects, and even influence minor systems independently. Jax monitored them closely, offering guidance but allowing their creativity and intelligence to flourish. The experience was exhilarating. Human ingenuity had provided the tools, but the triplets' intellect brought them to life. The Queen, now fully aware that something extraordinary was happening, hesitated. Her instincts told her that her triplets were no longer fully under her control. Yet she could not deny their intelligence, their adaptability, and the subtle influence they were exerting over the station. It was a lesson in humility, a recognition that even a ruler as powerful as she could underestimate the potential of others. Jax took a deep breath. The triplets had achieved remarkable progress. They were mobile, coordinated, and capable of interacting with their environment in ways previously thought impossible. Yet the challenge was not over. The Queen's attention was acute, and any misstep could expose them. He knew that patience, creativity, and careful planning would be the keys to the next phase. That night, under the soft lavender glow of Zyphora, the triplets rested in their containment suits. Their pulses conveyed excitement and satisfaction, but also anticipation. They had learned the power of intelligence, strategy, and human-guided ingenuity. They had moved beyond the limitations of their bodies, and the world of the station was beginning to open up before them. Jax watched them, pride swelling in his chest. Humans had always found ways to overcome obstacles, to turn limitations into advantages. Now he was witnessing it in action, guiding beings who had been underestimated their entire lives to achieve potential that even the Queen could not have imagined. The seeds of change had grown, nurtured by intelligence, courage, and the quiet determination of a human janitor. Outside, the station orbited silently, unaware of the revolution unfolding within. The triplets were no longer passive observers. They were active participants, guided by human ingenuity and their own brilliant minds. And the Queen, powerful and perceptive as she was, had begun to realize that her world was changing in ways she could not yet control. In the observation deck, Jax whispered softly to the triplets, "Tomorrow we go further. You are ready." Their pulses responded, a clear acknowledgement of understanding and readiness. The path ahead was dangerous but full of potential. The story of human ingenuity and alien intelligence was only beginning, and the next steps promised to change the station forever. The station felt tense in a way it never had before. Even the hum of machinery seemed sharper, more aware, as if the lavender-lit corridors themselves sensed the change that was coming. Jax had spent weeks preparing this moment, guiding the triplets as they learned to move, interact, and manipulate their surroundings. Now, for the first time, they were ready to act fully on their intelligence and their newfound abilities. The neurointerface suits hummed softly as the triplets moved in perfect coordination. Jax watched closely, adjusting minor settings and monitoring their pulses. Each triplet's mind worked independently, yet together they formed a collective intelligence, capable of problem-solving and planning that surpassed even what he had expected. It was human ingenuity at work, reflected through alien minds, combining intuition, creativity, and strategy. Tonight, the Queen would see something she could not ignore. She had already grown suspicious, her instincts telling her that her children were no longer passive. Patrols had reported anomalies, and small inconsistencies in camera feeds had been noted. Jara's eyes, sharp and perceptive, scanned the observation deck, seeking patterns and detecting the faintest disturbances. Her tail flicked with agitation as she realized that she was no longer in full control. Jax gave the first signal. The triplets moved silently through the passageways, their limbs guided by the interface suits and their minds coordinated in near-perfect harmony. They navigated maintenance corridors, avoided patrols, and reached a section of the station where environmental controls, communication arrays, and automation systems converged. Here, their influence could be significant yet subtle. The first demonstration was simple but effective. The triplets manipulated the station's ventilation systems, redirecting airflow to simulate natural changes in temperature and pressure. Lights shifted subtly, automated cleaning units adjusted, and small mechanical devices moved with precision. To any casual observer, it would appear normal. To the Queen, it was undeniable proof that something extraordinary was happening. Jara's ears twitched as she watched the feeds. The triplets were controlling their environment with intelligence and precision. Her instincts screamed that she was witnessing their true potential for the first time. She leaned forward, eyes wide, realizing that her children were no longer confined by their physical limitations. They were thinking, planning, and acting with an independence she had not foreseen. Jax guided them further. They accessed minor communication arrays, sending coded messages to his portable interface. The signals were complex, showing foresight, strategy, and coordination. The triplets were no longer just learning, they were teaching each other and even guiding Jax in ways he had not anticipated. It was a collaboration across species, a union of human ingenuity and alien intellect. The Queen, realizing the full extent of what was happening, rose from her throne and moved toward the observation deck herself. She wanted to confront the situation directly, to understand whether this was an anomaly, a flaw in her control, or something deeper. Her claws clicked on the polished floor as she approached, a mixture of curiosity and caution in her gaze. Jax knew the moment of truth had arrived. He whispered softly to the triplets, "Stay calm, focus, move only when safe." Their pulses responded instantly, a perfect reflection of understanding and discipline. Together, they prepared for the demonstration that would define their existence on the station. The triplets initiated a sequence that combined movement, system control, and subtle interaction with the Queen's environment. Panels shifted, devices aligned, and lights adjusted, all in perfect synchronization. Jax watched in awe as his students executed the plan flawlessly, proving that their intelligence and creativity were unstoppable when guided carefully. Jara reached the observation deck just in time to see the final stage. A small panel opened, revealing a hidden interface she had never noticed. The triplets moved a lightweight mechanism through it, activating minor systems in the station. It was a display of ingenuity, coordination, and problem-solving that no one had expected. The Queen froze, her eyes wide as she realized she was witnessing the full potential of her children and of the human guiding them. Jax stepped forward cautiously, speaking in the language of the station. "Your Majesty," he said, "they are capable, more than anyone could have imagined. They are not just observers, they are thinkers, strategists, and creators." The Queen's ears twitched as she considered his words. She had always valued intelligence and discipline, but she had never seen creativity applied in this way before. The triplets, sensing the Queen's attention, paused their actions briefly. They pulsed signals of awareness and respect, acknowledging her presence without fear. It was a moment of clarity. Jara realized that her children were not threats, they were not weak. They were brilliant, capable of reasoning, innovation, and strategic thought, and they had been underestimated because of their physical limitations. Jax guided them to demonstrate one final skill. The triplets coordinated a sequence that optimized a minor system in the station, improving efficiency and stability. Automated units moved smoothly, energy systems balanced perfectly, and small maintenance routines completed flawlessly. It was a subtle yet undeniable proof that their intelligence could be applied for the benefit of the station and its inhabitants. The Queen's tail swished slowly, a sign of deep contemplation. She had always believed that strength, control, and observation were the keys to success. Now she saw something different. Intelligence, creativity, and collaboration, the very qualities humans embodied, were equally, if not more, powerful. She looked at Jax, her gaze filled with a mixture of awe and respect. "You have taught them well," she said softly, almost to herself, And you human have shown ingenuity I did not expect. Jax nodded, careful not to overstate his role. Human ingenuity, yes, but it had been the combination of guidance and the triplets' brilliance that created this outcome. With a deliberate motion, Jara signaled the end of her inspection. She understood now that the triplets were capable, independent, and deserving of trust. Her focus shifted from control to guidance. Instead of observing constantly, she would allow them to explore their abilities, providing support rather than confinement. It was a change in perspective, one that acknowledged intelligence over limitation. Jax allowed himself a small smile. The risk had been enormous, but the result was extraordinary. Human creativity had unlocked potential in minds that no one had thought capable. The triplets had proven themselves, and in doing so had demonstrated the power of collaboration, strategy, and ingenuity. The triplets pulsed with excitement. They could sense the Queen's acceptance, and their neural signals radiated joy and relief. For the first time, they were free to explore not just their immediate environment but the possibilities of their own abilities. Jax guided them carefully, encouraging them to continue learning, experimenting, and growing. The Queen, now seated in her throne, observed quietly. Her eyes reflected understanding and respect. She had underestimated the human mind and her children's creativity. She had assumed that physical limitation equaled weakness, but she had been wrong. Intelligence, strategy, and collaboration were forces that could not be contained by observation alone. Over the next hours, the triplets explored the station in small, controlled ways. They interacted with systems, coordinated minor tasks, and tested the limits of their abilities. Jax monitored closely, ensuring safety and efficiency. The station, once a place of strict observation and confinement, had become a laboratory of innovation and collaboration. Jara approached Jax. "Your methods are unusual," she admitted, "but effective. You have proven the value of intelligence and guidance." Jax nodded humbly. Humans often worked quietly, solving problems with creativity rather than confrontation. Here, that philosophy had succeeded spectacularly. The triplets, now confident in their abilities, pulsed signals that were complex, almost conversational. Jax interpreted them carefully. They were curious about the station, about their environment, and about the possibilities of interaction. They were no longer subjects of observation. They were thinkers, explorers, and collaborators. The Queen made a decision. She would no longer monitor them obsessively. Instead, she would allow them to develop under guidance with trust and respect. Their abilities, once underestimated, were now recognized as an asset, not a liability. The station itself began to change subtly, as minor systems were optimized by the triplets' thoughtful interventions. Jax felt a surge of pride. Human ingenuity had bridged a gap between species, unlocking potential that had long been ignored. The triplets' intelligence, combined with his guidance, had transformed their existence and reshaped the Queen's perspective. It was a testament to creativity, problem-solving, and collaboration, the qualities that defined humans and allowed them to excel in even the most unexpected circumstances. In the days that followed, the triplets continued to grow, both mentally and in their ability to interact with their environment. They explored new systems, developed strategies for efficiency, and communicated with precision and creativity. Jax remained their guide, mentor, and partner, fostering a relationship built on trust, respect, and shared discovery. The Queen, observing this new dynamic, realized the profound lesson the human had brought. Strength and control were not the only measures of power. Intelligence, strategy, and ingenuity could achieve results far beyond brute force or constant observation. She began to value collaboration, understanding that even the smallest contributions could lead to extraordinary outcomes when guided with insight. Under the soft glow of Zyphora, the station had transformed. What was once a place of surveillance and control had become a center of learning, creativity, and innovation. The triplets thrived, Jax guided, and the Queen learned to respect the unexpected potential of those she had underestimated. The story concluded not with conflict, but with recognition. Human ingenuity could unlock brilliance in ways that no one expected. The triplets were free, not just physically but intellectually. And the Queen, powerful and perceptive as she was, had learned a lesson she would not forget. Intelligence, creativity, and collaboration were forces to be respected, nurtured, and celebrated. Jax looked at the triplets one final time that day, their pulses vibrant and confident. "We did it," he said softly. The triplets responded with a series of patterns that translated simply into joy, curiosity, and trust. For the first time, their existence felt limitless. And in the quiet hum of the station, under the lavender light, human ingenuity had truly changed the course of alien lives and the perspective of their ruler forever.